Hi everyone, it's Shem. Today I'm gonna quickly talk you through of how to install some bar risers onto Honda CRF250L, and the same procedure will most likely apply to the Rally version 2. But before I start, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview why I decided to go for bar risers. So, as you might know from my other videos, I'm not very experienced in terms of off-road riding. So initially I just accepted the bike how it was. I just installed some protective stuff on it, and that was all. I did not really modify anything else. So after a few long rides, and I'm talking between sort of 8 to 12 hours on the saddle, with probably 6 hours out of that spent off-roading, I could feel a little bit of a pain in my lower back, especially when a lot of riding was done standing up. And initially I thought nothing of it. I just thought, after so many hours on the saddle, it's probably normal. But then I went out with a friend of mine who's got a Yamaha Tenere T7, and he's similar height to me, and he did not really have that problem. And moreover, when I had a go on his bike, it felt much more comfortable in terms of height of the handlebars. So I was able to stand straight with my back fairly straight, or in a quite relaxed pose, and stand up comfortably. Whereas on this bike, I can't. I have to bend down a little bit, or sort of bend my knees. So that kind of indicated to me that perhaps I could try some bar risers and see how I'm gonna feel about it. I've read on some forums that installing bar risers is not always a good idea, and the reason for that is that if your handlebars are lower, you putting more weight onto the front wheel, which when you're off-roading, it's actually a good thing. So I'm kind of in between, but for the sake of comfort and those bar risers, I got them off eBay UK, and they were about I think £30. They're really well made, a nice piece of aluminium, and you can actually choose different heights depending on the configuration, so it gives you quite a lot of flexibility. And I thought for 30 quid I can actually increase my riding comfort quite a lot. So I'm gonna install them on the bike now and do some riding, and I'm gonna report back to you of how I found the whole bar riser thing. By the way, my height is 5'10", which is 178 centimeters. So yeah, let's begin the installation process. So the installation process will start by removing 4 of those clamping bolts. I think they are M8, and the spanner size is number 12. Okay, so the clamps have been taken off. I'm now going to start putting the risers in. So obviously that goes down in places where the handlebars were, and that goes up, and then you put the spacers in between these two to adjust the height accordingly. So I'm gonna do that now, and then put the clamps back on and see how the handlebars feel. Okay, so I have provisionally clamped the handlebars in place, and spent significant amount of time playing with sort of tension on various cables and hoses, and just checking everything. So if you're doing it yourself, there are a number of cables that I would advise to pay attention to. So there are the cables that don't really move when you turn the handlebars, and one of them is the front brake hose, and it's just routed here behind the ignition. So depends on how high you raise your handlebars, you may need to release the plastic clamp. I'm not sure if you can see it from here. Let me see if I can demonstrate it. The plastic clamp over here, and to just give it a bit more room, really. In my case, that wasn't necessary. I sort of got away with raising the handlebars and not putting too much tension on it, so that's absolutely fine. Another thing that's kind of stationary in the sense that it doesn't move when you turn the handlebars are all those electrical harnesses. So in my case, with the 26mm risers in, that's not really a problem, and same on the other side. That's got plenty of free play here, so it's not an issue in my case. where I started noticing issues is clutch cable, because that gets tension when you turn the handlebars, and throttle cables which run here. So thing to pay attention to is, starting with the clutch cable, when you put the handlebars in a full lock, that's got some tension on it. In my case, actually, the tension is not too bad. I can still move the cable a little bit, so there is enough free play on it. So when I turn the handlebars, it doesn't actually engage the clutch, which is what you want, really. And if you turn it the other way, obviously that's got even more free play. So just when you're installing the handlebars, make sure that when you turn your handlebars, it doesn't engage your clutch. Obviously, you wouldn't want that. And then another thing, which is kind of even more important, is throttle cables. Okay, so the throttle cables run from the throttle body over here, above my barkbuster, through the little gap over here, and they go through a factory sort of metal guide over here, but because I've got a screen, they have to go in between the screen bracket and the body of the bike. So in my circumstances, that means that I'm having additional obstructions in cable's way. So if you can see it from that angle, yeah, that puts a little bit of extra tension on the cable, because obviously it's not free, it has to rest against that, especially when you put the handlebars in the full lock, and then they go through here, which again, another thing that puts an extra tension on the cable, depending on how high your barkbusters are. So I've managed to actually install the bar risers, and with everything that I currently have on the bike, and I mean barkbusters and the screen, I couldn't get all of the spacers in, I've tried different configurations, and every single time that resulted in the throttle binding on the full lock. So basically I would turn the throttle on and could feel additional tension, and then when I release the throttle would stay like this. It wouldn't go back to its original position, which is obviously not ideal. So I might have shown you at the beginning of the video, the risers come with various spacers. So you could have a riser itself, which is the bit at the bottom and bit at the top, and that gives you a 21 millimeters raise. Then you've got the 5 millimeter spacer here, so at the moment I've got a total of 26 millimeters, and then you've got an additional 10 millimeter, which would give you a total of 36 millimeters. So with my setup, I couldn't get away with it. So the maximum I've managed was a total of 26 millimeters. In order to accommodate this setup, I had to make some tweaks to the position of the handlebars. So I'm gonna quickly talk you through them, just so you know what I've done. Starting with the tilt of the handlebars. Not sure if you can see it, but there is a little dot here, which basically indicates to the people who assemble the bike of the factory setting of the handlebars tilt. So that dot, according to the manual, should be aligned with the gap between the top clamp and the bottom clamp. And as you can see, well, maybe if you can see from here, in my case, it's not. I've actually tilted the handlebars forward, and there are a couple of reasons for it. So the first one is that when you put the risers on, you're raising the handlebars up, but because the top crown of the fork is in a slight angle, it also brings them closer to you. And because the handlebars have that natural kind of shape that tilt towards you, it means that they get slightly closer towards the rider, which is not necessarily what I was intending. So that was one of the reasons to put them forward. Another reason is obviously tension on various hoses, pipes and cables. By actually tilting the handlebars forward, the throttle body assembly is kind of pin located to the handlebars, so it also moves forward, and that means that the throttle hoses are ever so slightly closer to where they were originally, which means that in my case, they don't bind. So if you actually look at the bike from its side, I'm not sure how well you can see it, I've not finished assembling it yet, but this is where the roughly aligned barkbuster and the mirror is, and the other side I haven't really done anything with it yet. So if you look at it, this is how much tilt I put on the handlebars. You see how much lower that's pointing than the other one, which I roughly aligned. So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that. And if you've got a lot of stuff on the bike like I do, which is Barkbusters and the screen, which put additional tension on the hoses and cables, that might be a way to get away with risers and prevent anything from binding. So I'm gonna continue with that approach. I'm gonna try to assemble everything, align the mirrors, align the Barkbusters again so they're parallel with the ground, and then yeah, I'm gonna talk you through that now. I've experimented with the handlebar tilt. Obviously, I've already told you that I'm going to tilt them forward. The question was how much, and you know, Murphy's Law, the most comfortable position that I find the handlebars in means that the top part of them is straight above the bolts, which consequently means that I couldn't use the bolts that were supplied with it, and I had to just get some bolts from my drawer and use this so I can actually fit the spanner, because otherwise I cannot put the Allen key through that. I thought about tilting the handlebars even more forward, which is actually doable, and it raises the ends even higher and it pushes them forward a bit more. And the problem with that is that apart from doing that, it also means that the handlebar ends twist like this. I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating at the moment, but it makes it feel less comfortable. It kind of feels strange because you're holding the handlebar and your hand is slightly like this. So I think this is probably as far as I would like to go at this stage. I'm gonna tighten this and you know, give it a go. I won't be able to put my torque wrench there, but I'm gonna check the specs now and let you know. Okay, so I couldn't really find the torque specific for this bolt in the manual, but I found a generic torque for the bolt M8 with a flange, which that's what it is now. I put the washers on. I don't like bolts going directly onto that aluminium clamp without any washers on, and the risers didn't come with any washers. I've used my own. So the torque for these bolts, according to the Honda manual, for the generic torque for M8 bolts is 27 Newton meters. So obviously I couldn't get my torque wrench underneath here, so I've just started tightening from the front. So I've clamped it enough so these gaps have disappeared, but not over tight, just, you know, hand tight. And then the rest of the torquing I've done from the back. Obviously it works on a leverage, so I've torqued this to 27 Newton meters, and I'm hoping this will be fine. Obviously at the later date I'll find some nicer bolts and replace this, but for the time being, just to give it a go, that should be sufficient. So I'm gonna proceed with readjusting everything else now and take it from there. Okay, so everything has now been configured. So Barkbusters are in a fairly parallel to the ground position. And one thing to note, if you've got a set of protectors here, and when you actually change the position of the handlebars, it means that they align differently, and it's actually harder to put them on. So this clamp had to be moved up slightly, so it's as close as it can get to this, and then this is in a bit of an angle, so it's not as neat as it was originally, but still it's fairly rigid, no issues at all. As a reminder, if you've got this on, the M8 bolts here are 20 Newton meters, so 20 here and 20 at the front here, and the M6 bolts here are 10 Newton meters on that clamp. Then obviously I had to move my mirrors, as these are connected to the clutch and brake levers, so these are 9.8 Newton meters in terms of torque, and obviously same for that side. So everything's in place now, and I've actually measured the distance from the ground when the bike was on the stand with the front suspension not being compressed, just slightly touching the ground in an upright position, and I've measured the distance from the center of the handlebars to the floor. And with the with the stock bike, the distance was I think it was 119 centimeters, and with the risers is 125, so about a 6 centimeter gain as a result of not only risers but also tilting the handlebars forward. So it's actually 6 centimeters at the end of the handlebars, which I'm quite pleased with. So I'm gonna give it a final check to make sure that everything is looking okay. So all the hoses that are and cable harnesses are absolutely fine. I've already checked this. Brake hose is fine. So it's only the clutch lever really, which just checking the tension. It's got a little bit of free play, so yeah, that's absolutely fine. And the clutch cables, which actually not clutch cables, the throttle cables, which there is quite a bit of tension on them. So let me just put it on the full lock and see if that no, oh there, that binds. As you can see, you know, I pin the throttle and it stays, it doesn't spring back. So when I've been doing my initial assessments, I've had the plastic cover removed from the bar booster, and I think that actually is making this it's putting an extra tension on the cable. So I'm gonna have a look if I can cut a little bit of that plastic to just give it a bit more room in here, because it wasn't an issue before and it is now. So well, I'm suspecting that to be the main reason. So let me just trim that plastic now and take it from there. Okay, so as you can see, I've trimmed that bit of plastic over here, and I filed down all the edges to make sure there is nothing sharp sticking out that would kind of damage the cable sleeving. So as you can see, there is a little bit more room here, not much, but we've gained a little bit. And if I put the full lock onto the handlebars, yes, you can hear them moving, you can hear them being stretched a little bit, but they still move. And I've already tested the throttle and it springs back to its original position. So if you have a look, we're on the full lock now, and it works the same way as it does when the handlebars are straight. One more thing that I've tested, and I recommend doing that as well, is I've started the bike up and I've turned the handlebars both ways until the full lock position, just to make sure that the engine isn't gaining the revs, because it might well be that the throttle isn't locking, but because of cable being pulled, your revs might be increasing. So it's worth double checking that for the sake of a minute and starting the engine up. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with everything, with the 26mm risers here and tilting the handlebars forward. We've gained about 60mm rise at the handlebar ends, and also the handlebars were moved slightly forward, probably judging by the distance from when they were originally, I would say about 25mm, which to me that's not a problem. It gives me a bit more room between where I sit and the cockpit, which is great. So when the weather gets better, I'm gonna take it out for a spin and see how it feels. I've sat on it initially and it seems much better, and when I stand on the foot pegs, I can actually do it in a quite relaxed position, with my back being straight, which is actually an improvement of how it was before. But yeah, let's take it out for a spin and I'm gonna report back afterwards. Okay, so I just came back from a little ride. I've only been out for 15-20 minutes. I didn't really have any more time to do anything serious, but so far I'm really pleased with how the bike feels. First of all, when you sit down, the sitting position seems to be more comfortable for my height. Again, I'm 5'10", 178 centimeters, and I think because I tilted the handlebars forward, and obviously because they're higher, I just seem to have more room over here, and it's just basically more comfortable than before. In terms of standing up, I've done a bit of standing up, including some tight turns, and again, for my height, I seem to prefer that. I no longer have to bend my back or try to bend my knees. I can kind of stand comfortably in a fairly relaxed position, and it just feels better than before. So these are only initial impressions. Obviously I might have a different opinion once I've been off-roading again for 10 or 12 hours, but at this very stage I'm pretty happy with it. And actually the position reminds me very much of my friend's Yamaha Tenere T7, and I'm purely talking about the relationship between where you sit and where the handlebars are. So it seems very similar now, again from memory. So far so good. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please write them down in the section below. And other than that, all the best.